Victoria Hayes pressed her fingertips against the bathroom sink, staring at the pregnancy test with disbelief coursing through her veins. The two pink lines mocked her from the white plastic stick, declaring something medically absurd. She had never been with anyone. Never. The very idea that she could be pregnant defied every law of biology she understood. Her small apartment felt smaller suddenly, the walls pressing in as panic rose in her chest. Victoria splashed cold water on her face, trying to calm the storm building inside her mind. 3 weeks ago, she had visited Genesis Fertility and Wellness Center for painful menstrual cramps. Dr. Rachel Morrison had been recommended by her supervisor at St. Catherine's Hospital, where Victoria worked in the pediatric wing. The appointment had seemed perfectly normal. A simple examination, some routine tests, and a prescription for pain management. Nothing unusual, nothing that should have resulted in this. The morning sun filtered through her apartment window, casting golden light across the worn furniture she had collected from thrift stores over the years. Victoria lived simply on her nurse's salary, dedicating most of her time to caring for sick children and visiting elderly patients who had no family. Her life was about service, about giving to others. She had never expected to receive something so monumentally life-changing. Her phone buzzed with a message from the hospital. Margaret Price was asking for her. The 86-year-old woman had been in palliative care for 4 months, fighting pancreatic cancer with remarkable dignity. Despite having no living relatives, Margaret faced her final days with humor and grace that inspired everyone around her. Victoria had grown close to the elderly woman, visiting even on her days off. Victoria drove to the hospital in a daze, her mind spinning with impossible questions. How could this happen? Was the test wrong? But deep in her heart, she knew the answer. The exhaustion, the nausea, the strange tenderness in her body. These were not coincidences. Margaret was awake when Victoria entered the hospice room, her thin frame propped against pillows, her sharp eyes missing nothing. The old woman had always possessed an uncanny ability to read people, to see past their careful masks. "You look troubled, my dear girl," Margaret said, her voice weak but kind. "Something has shaken your world." Victoria tried to smile, adjusting the blanket around Margaret's frail legs. "I'm fine. How are you feeling today? Did you eat breakfast?" "Don't deflect with me, child. I may be dying, but I'm not blind." Margaret reached out with a trembling hand, grasping Victoria's fingers with surprising strength. "Whatever storm you're facing, you must walk through it, not around it." "That's the only way forward," tears threatened to spill from Victoria's eyes. "I don't know how to walk through something impossible." "Nothing is truly impossible. Difficult, yes. Frightening, absolutely. But not impossible." Margaret squeezed her hand gently. "You are stronger than you believe, Victoria Hayes. Remember that when the darkness comes." The words settled around Victoria's heart like a protective shield. Before she could respond, her phone rang. Unknown number. She almost ignored it, but something made her answer. "Miss Hayes?" The voice was crisp, professional, female. "This is Dr. Rachel Morrison from Genesis Fertility Center. I need you to come to the clinic immediately. We have an urgent matter to discuss regarding your recent visit." Victoria's stomach dropped. "What kind of matter?" "This isn't something I can discuss over the phone. Please, it's critically important. Can you come within the hour?" The drive to the clinic felt like moving through thick fog. Victoria's hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly her knuckles turned white. The Genesis Fertility Center occupied a modern glass building in the affluent district of the city, a place where wealthy couples paid enormous sums for the chance to have children. Dr. Morrison met her at the entrance, her usual confident demeanor replaced with visible anxiety. Beside her stood a tall man in an expensive suit, his silver hair perfectly styled, his expression grave. "Miss Hayes, I'm Bernard Whitfield, legal counsel for Genesis Fertility Center." He introduced himself as they walked quickly down a sterile hallway. "What we're about to tell you is of the utmost sensitivity." They entered a conference room where Dr. Morrison closed the door carefully. The doctor's hands shook as she opened a file folder, avoiding Victoria's eyes. "There has been a catastrophic error," Dr. Morrison began, her voice tight. "During your examination 3 weeks ago, you were mistakenly given a fertility treatment intended for another patient. The procedure involved genetic material from a donor. The words seemed to echo in the small room. Victoria felt dizzy, reaching for the table to steady herself. You gave me someone else's treatment? You inseminated me without my knowledge or consent? It was a terrible accident involving our labeling system, Mr. Whitfield said quickly. We accept full responsibility and are prepared to offer comprehensive compensation. Compensation? Victoria's voice rose. You violated my body. You took away my choice. You did something irreversible without my permission, and you think money fixes that? Dr. Morrison finally met her eyes, tears streaming down the doctor's face. I am so deeply sorry, Miss Hayes. There are no words adequate for what we've done to you. Whose genetic material? Victoria demanded, her voice shaking with fury and fear. Who is the biological father? Mr. Whitfield and Dr. Morrison exchanged loaded glances. The lawyer cleared his throat. Sebastian Sterling. The name landed like a thunderbolt. Everyone knew Sebastian Sterling, the tech genius who had built $3 billion companies before age 40. His face appeared regularly in business magazines, news programs, and society pages. He was brilliant, powerful, and completely unreachable. He existed in a different universe from Victoria's modest life. This cannot be real, Victoria whispered, sinking into a chair. This is some kind of nightmare. Unfortunately, it's very real, Mr. Whitfield continued. There's more you need to know. Mr. Sterling's fiancée, Olivia Sterling, was also at the clinic that day for fertility treatment. Due to the same labeling error, she received genetic material from a different donor. She's currently pregnant and believes the child is Mr. Sterling's biological offspring. The complexity of the disaster washed over Victoria in waves. Not only was she carrying a stranger's child, but that stranger was one of the most influential men in the country. His fiancée was also pregnant, believing their future together was secure, unaware that everything was built on a medical catastrophe. Does he know? Victoria asked quietly. We informed him this morning. He's requesting to meet with you as soon as possible. I need air. Victoria stood abruptly, her legs unsteady. I need to think. I need time. Miss Hayes, please understand the delicacy of this situation, Mr. Whitfield said urgently. Mr. Sterling is a public figure. If this becomes known, the media attention will be relentless. I don't care about his reputation, Victoria interrupted, surprising herself with the steel in her voice. I care about what happens to me. To this baby I never asked for, but is somehow growing inside me. She left the clinic, walking blindly through city streets. Her phone rang repeatedly, but she ignored every call. The world had shifted completely, and she needed to find her footing in this new, impossible reality. By evening, Victoria found herself back at the hospital, drawn to the only place that felt like sanctuary. Margaret was sleeping, so Victoria sat quietly in the visitor's chair, watching the gentle rise and fall of the old woman's breathing. You came back, Margaret murmured without opening her eyes. I knew you would. How did you know I left? I know many things, dear child. Margaret's eyes opened, surprisingly clear despite her illness. And I know that whatever happened today changed everything. Victoria felt tears finally breaking free. I don't know what to do. Then don't do anything yet. Sit with the truth. Let it settle in your bones. The right path will reveal itself when you're ready to see it. They sat together in comfortable silence until Margaret drifted back to sleep. Victoria was preparing to leave when her phone rang again. Different unknown number. Against every instinct screaming to ignore it, she answered. Miss Hayes. The voice was deep, controlled, unmistakably masculine. This is Sebastian Sterling. I believe we need to talk. Victoria's breath caught in her throat. Hearing Sebastian Sterling's voice made everything suddenly, terrifyingly real. This was not some abstract problem to be solved later. This was a man, a real person whose life had collided with hers in the most unimaginable way. How did you get my number? She managed to ask, her voice steadier than she felt. The clinic provided it. I apologize for calling so late, but this situation requires immediate attention. His voice carried authority without arrogance, the tone of someone accustomed to solving complex problems. We need to meet Miss Hayes tomorrow if possible. I don't think that's a good idea. I need time to process everything. I understand completely. However, time is not our ally in this matter. Every day that passes increases the risk of this becoming public knowledge. For both our sakes, we should discuss how to move forward. Victoria closed her eyes, remembering Margaret's advice about walking through storms rather than around them. Where would we meet? I have a private estate outside the city. Willow Creek Manor. It's secluded, which means we can talk without concern for privacy. I can send a car for you tomorrow at 2 o'clock. I can drive myself. Just send me the address. There was a pause on the line. Miss Hayes, I'm not trying to control you. I'm trying to protect both of us from media attention. If reporters connect you to me right now, your life will become unbearable. He had a valid point, though Victoria hated admitting it. Fine, send the car. But Mr. Sterling, understand this. I didn't ask for any of this, and I won't be bullied into decisions that aren't mine to make. I wouldn't dream of it. Something in his tone shifted, became almost respectful. Until tomorrow, Miss Hayes. That night, Victoria barely slept. Her mind created endless scenarios, each more overwhelming than the last. What did Sebastian Sterling want from her? Money to make the problem disappear? A legal agreement demanding her silence? Would he pressure her to terminate the pregnancy? The thought made her hand instinctively move to her still flat stomach. Despite the chaos and impossibility, she already felt protective of this tiny life. Morning came too quickly. Victoria called the hospital to request a personal day, something she rarely did. She spent hours trying to decide what to wear, finally settling on a simple navy dress that made her feel professional without trying too hard. When the sleek black car arrived precisely at 2 o'clock, Victoria took a deep breath and stepped inside. The driver was courteous and silent, taking her through winding roads lined with ancient oak trees. The city fell away, replaced by rolling countryside dotted with estates that spoke of old money and careful privacy. Willow Creek Manor appeared after 20 minutes, a stunning property that somehow managed to be both grand and welcoming. The house was built of warm stone and rich wood, surrounded by gardens that looked professionally maintained yet natural. Sebastian Sterling waited on the front steps. Photographs had not prepared Victoria for meeting him in person. He stood well over 6 feet tall, with dark hair showing distinguished silver at the temples. His eyes were in striking shade of green that seemed to see everything. He wore casual clothes, dark jeans, and a cream sweater, but carried himself with an ease that suggested he would command attention in any setting. "Miss Hayes," he said, walking forward to meet her. "Thank you for coming." "I'm not sure I had much choice in the matter." Victoria kept her voice neutral despite her racing heart. Something flickered in those green eyes. Understanding, perhaps. "You always have choices. I hope to present options that work for both of us, but the final decision is yours. Please come inside." The interior of the house surprised her. She had expected cold minimalism or ostentatious displays of wealth. Instead, she found warmth everywhere. Books lined floor-to-ceiling shelves. Comfortable furniture invited sitting. Family photographs covered surfaces, showing a younger Sebastian with a beautiful woman and various relatives. Fresh flowers filled vases throughout the space. This was not a showpiece. This was genuinely a home. "Can I offer you something to drink? Water, tea, juice?" Sebastian asked, gesturing toward a sun-filled sitting room. Water would be good. He returned moments later with 2 crystal glasses, and they sat across from each other, a coffee table between them. For several heartbeats, neither spoke. Victoria studied him carefully, noting the tension in his jaw, the careful control in his posture. He was not as calm as he appeared. "I won't pretend to understand what you're experiencing," Sebastian finally said, his deep voice quiet. "This situation is unprecedented for both of us, but I recognize that you bear the greater burden. Your body, your choice, your future has been violated in ways I cannot fully comprehend." The acknowledgement surprised Victoria. She had expected defensiveness or detachment. "What do you want from me, Mr. Sterling?" "Sebastian, please. Formality seems absurd given our circumstances." He set down his glass, leaning forward slightly. "I want to understand what you want, what you need. Then I want to propose a solution that protects everyone involved, especially the child you're carrying." "A solution," Victoria repeated carefully. "You mean making this problem disappear?" "No." The word came out sharp, almost offended. "I mean acknowledging reality and dealing with it honestly. I've spent the last 18 hours considering every possible approach, and I believe there's only one path forward that serves everyone's interests. Victoria waited, her heart pounding. I think we should get married. The words hung in the air like smoke. Victoria stared at him, certain she had misheard. Excuse me? I'm proposing marriage. A legal partnership that protects both of us and gives this child the best possible start in life. You cannot be serious. Victoria stood abruptly, pacing to the window. People don't marry strangers because of a medical accident. People do far stranger things for far less important reasons. Sebastian remained seated, his voice maddeningly rational. Think about the alternatives, Victoria. If this becomes public, your life will be destroyed. Media will camp outside your home. Reporters will dig through your past, interview everyone you've ever known. Your privacy will cease to exist. And yours won't? I have resources to manage media attention. Security teams, public relations experts, legal protection. You have none of that. He stood now, walking closer but maintaining respectful distance. Beyond the media circus, consider practical matters. You're a pediatric nurse earning a modest salary. How will you afford childcare, medical expenses, everything a child needs while working full-time? Plenty of single mothers manage, Victoria said defensively. They shouldn't have to struggle alone. Not when I can provide everything necessary for both of you. Victoria turned to face him directly. Everything except love. You're offering money and security, but what about warmth, affection, and actual family? Or does your world not include those things? Something crossed Sebastian's face, pain quickly masked. You're right. I can't promise feelings I don't have. My engagement to Olivia was always a practical arrangement, a partnership of convenience between families. But this situation is different because this child is actually mine, biologically. That creates responsibilities I take seriously. What about Olivia? What happens to her? Sebastian moved to the window beside Victoria, staring out at the gardens. I told her this morning about the clinic error, about your pregnancy, about the fact that her child is not biologically mine. She's devastated, as you might imagine. She's deciding whether to continue her pregnancy or terminate it. And she's fine with you marrying me instead? She's angry, hurt, and feeling betrayed by circumstances beyond anyone's control. But Olivia is pragmatic. She understands that our arrangement was always about strategic alliance, not romance. Once she processes the shock, she'll move on. Probably find someone whose family connections better serve her career ambitions. The coldness of it disturbed Victoria. Does anyone in your world actually feel anything? Or is everything just strategy and arrangements? Sebastian turned to look at her, and for the first time she saw genuine emotion in those green eyes. Grief, deep and old. I did feel once. I was married to Caroline, the woman in those photographs. We were genuinely in love, planning our future together. She was 8 months pregnant with our son when a drunk driver ran a red light. They both died instantly. Victoria's hand flew to her mouth. Sebastian, I'm so sorry. That was 6 years ago. I learned then that loving people makes you vulnerable in ways that power and wealth cannot protect against. So I stopped. I built walls. I made arrangements instead of forming attachments. He looked directly at her. And now fate has given me another chance at fatherhood in the most bizarre way imaginable. I may not be able to offer you love, Victoria, but I can offer protection, security, and a commitment to our child's well-being. Is that not worth something? Victoria felt her resolve wavering. Everything he said made logical sense, yet her heart rebelled against the coldness of it. What if I say no? Then I'll still provide financial support. I'll still want to be involved as a father, but everything becomes infinitely more complicated. Legal battles over custody arrangements, constant negotiations over decisions, our child caught in the middle of ongoing conflict. Is that what you want? The question struck at her deepest fears. Victoria thought about her own childhood, raised by a single mother who struggled constantly, who worked 3 jobs and still could barely pay bills. She remembered the shame of wearing second-hand clothes, of being the kid who couldn't afford field trips, of watching her mother cry over unpaid bills. Did she want that for her child? Could she provide better alone? I need time to think, she said finally. Of course. Take 3 days. Consider everything carefully. Sebastian reached into his pocket and pulled out a business card. My private number. Call any time, day or night, if you have questions or need anything. Victoria took the card, their fingers brushing briefly. An unexpected spark of connection passed between them, quickly dismissed by both. "This isn't about us, Victoria," Sebastian said quietly, as if reading her thoughts. "This is about giving an innocent child the best possible foundation. Everything else is secondary to that responsibility." The car ride home felt even more surreal than the journey there. Victoria's mind spun with impossible calculations. Could she really marry a man she didn't know? Live a life built on practicality rather than love? Yet wasn't security important too? Didn't her child deserve every advantage Sebastian could provide? When she arrived at her apartment building, Victoria found her stepmother, Claire, waiting in the lobby. Claire had married Victoria's father 5 years ago, a union of convenience that gave Claire financial security and gave Victoria's father companionship after her mother's death. Claire had never been warm toward Victoria, viewing her as competition for her father's limited resources. "Where have you been?" Claire demanded, her sharp eyes taking in Victoria's dress, the expensive car pulling away. "Your father has been trying to reach you." "I had an appointment." "An appointment?" Claire's gaze narrowed suspiciously. "You look different, pale, distracted. Are you pregnant?" The directness of the question made Victoria's stomach drop. "That's none of your business." "It absolutely is my business if you're about to embarrass this family with an illegitimate child. Your father has worked hard to build his reputation in this community." Victoria pushed past her stepmother toward the stairs. "Tell my father I'll call him tomorrow." "Victoria." Claire's voice stopped her. "Whatever trouble you've gotten yourself into, don't expect help from us. You've always been too independent, too proud. Now you'll learn what that costs." Alone in her apartment, Victoria collapsed on her worn sofa, Sebastian's business card still clutched in her hand. 3 days to decide her entire future. 3 days to choose between security and independence, between practical partnership and uncertain freedom. Her phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. She opened it hesitantly. "I know this is overwhelming. Remember, you're not alone in this. Whatever you decide, we'll figure it out together." The message was from Sebastian. Despite everything, despite the coldness of his proposal and the impossibility of their situation, those words offered unexpected comfort. Maybe, just maybe, there was more to Sebastian Sterling than carefully constructed walls and strategic arrangements. Victoria placed her hand over her stomach, feeling the first flutter of maternal protection. Whatever she decided, it would be for this child. Everything else was indeed secondary to that responsibility. Victoria spent the first day after her meeting with Sebastian in a fog of indecision. She went through the motions at work, caring for the children in the pediatric ward with her usual compassion, but her mind was elsewhere. Every quiet moment brought back the weight of the impossible choice before her. Marriage to a stranger or single motherhood with all its struggles. Security without love or freedom with uncertainty. Margaret sensed her turmoil immediately when Victoria stopped by the hospice wing during her lunch break. The elderly woman's condition had deteriorated over the past week, but her mind remained sharp as ever. "Sit down, child," Margaret said, patting the bed beside her with a frail hand. "Tell me what's tearing you apart." Victoria hesitated, then found herself sharing everything. The clinic error, the pregnancy, Sebastian Sterling's proposal. Margaret listened without interruption, her wise eyes never leaving Victoria's face. "So you must choose between safety and authenticity," Margaret said when Victoria finished. "Between what your mind says is sensible and what your heart says is true." "My heart doesn't know what's true anymore," Victoria admitted. "Everything happened so fast. How can I make a decision this enormous in just 3 days?" Margaret smiled gently. "The universe rarely gives us convenient timelines. But let me ask you this. When you think about marrying this man, what frightens you most? The marriage itself or something deeper?" Victoria considered the question carefully. "I think I'm afraid of living a half-life, of being married but never truly known, of my child growing up in a home where partnership replaces affection, where everything is managed rather than felt." "Those are valid fears," Margaret acknowledged. "But perhaps you're making assumptions about this Sebastian Sterling based on what he told you rather than who he might actually be beneath. All those carefully constructed defenses. He told me himself he doesn't believe in love anymore, that he's built walls to protect himself. Walls can be dismantled, dear child. People who have loved deeply and lost carry their grief like armor. But underneath that armor, the capacity to feel remains. It simply needs the right circumstances to awaken again. Margaret squeezed Victoria's hand weakly. Maybe you're not just choosing for yourself and your baby. Maybe you're also choosing whether to give this wounded man a chance to live again instead of merely existing. The words stayed with Victoria throughout the day. That evening, as she sat in her small apartment, surrounded by the humble life she had built, her phone rang. Sebastian's name appeared on the screen. "I hope I'm not disturbing you," he said when she answered. "Not at all. I was just thinking about the proposal, among other things." Victoria moved to her window, looking out at the city lights. "Can I ask you something, Sebastian?" "Anything." "When Caroline was alive, what was it like? The life you shared with her?" There was a long pause. Victoria almost thought he had disconnected when his voice came back, quieter than before. It was like breathing. Effortless and essential. "We met in college, both studying computer science. She was brilliant, funny, and saw through all my pretensions. We built my first company together in our garage, living on ramen and coffee and dreams. When she became pregnant, I thought my life was complete. Then, in one senseless moment, it all ended." The raw pain in his voice made Victoria's throat tighten. "I'm sorry for asking. I didn't mean to cause you pain." "No, it's all right. You deserve to know who you're considering marrying. I'm not the man I was when Caroline was alive. That version of me died with her. What remains is functional, successful, but fundamentally incomplete." "What if you're wrong?" Victoria surprised herself with the question. "What if you're not incomplete but just dormant? Waiting for a reason to fully live again?" Sebastian was quiet for a moment. "That's a generous interpretation. Or maybe it's an honest one. Margaret, the elderly patient I told you about, said something today. She said people who build walls usually do it because they loved so deeply they're terrified to risk that pain again. But the capacity to feel doesn't disappear. It just hides. Your Margaret sounds wise. She is. She's also dying, which gives her a perspective most of us lack. She sees clearly because she has nothing left to fear." They talked for another hour, the conversation drifting from heavy topics to lighter ones. Sebastian told her about his work developing educational technology for underprivileged communities. Victoria shared stories about the children she cared for, the small triumphs and heartbreaking setbacks of pediatric nursing. By the time they said goodnight, something had shifted between them. The stranger on the phone felt slightly less strange. The next day brought unexpected complications. Victoria was leaving the hospital when a well-dressed woman approached her in the parking lot. She was stunning, with perfectly styled blonde hair, designer clothes, and an expression of barely contained fury. "You're Victoria Hayes," the woman said. It was not a question. Victoria's instincts immediately went on high alert. She looked up at him, this complicated man who had crashed into her life through the most impossible circumstances. "Yes, I'll marry you. Not because it's practical or logical, but because I think we both deserve a chance at something real. It won't be perfect. It will probably be messy and difficult, but it will be honest." Sebastian's face transformed, relief and something deeper flooding his features. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and cupped her face gently. "Thank you. For saying yes, for giving me a chance I probably don't deserve, for being brave when I've forgotten how to be." "We'll learn together," Victoria whispered. And there, in the dim hallway of her modest apartment building, Sebastian Sterling kissed her. Softly at first, then deeper, as if remembering something essential he'd thought lost forever. When they finally pulled apart, both were trembling. "This changes everything," Sebastian said quietly. "I hope so," Victoria replied, "because what we had before wasn't enough. Not for me, not for you, and definitely not for our child. We deserve more than arrangements and strategies. We deserve a real chance at happiness." As Victoria watched Sebastian drive away, she placed her hand over her stomach where new life grew. This tiny being had brought together two broken people and given them an unexpected opportunity, not just for partnership but for healing, for love, if they were brave enough to risk it. Her phone buzzed with a message from Margaret. "Trust your heart, dear child. It knows the way even when your mind is confused. I'm proud of you." Victoria smiled through sudden tears. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Telling her father, planning a wedding, navigating the complexities of merging two very different lives. But tonight she allowed herself to hope. To believe that sometimes the most impossible circumstances lead to the most beautiful possibilities. 3 months later, in a small ceremony witnessed only by close friends and necessary family, Victoria Hayes became Victoria Sterling. Margaret attended despite her weakening condition, tears streaming down her wrinkled face as she watched her young friend marry the complicated man who was learning, slowly but surely, how to love again. And in the front row, unexpectedly, sat Olivia with her growing belly, having chosen to continue her pregnancy and forge her own path forward. She caught Victoria's eye and smiled genuinely, a silent acknowledgement that sometimes life's greatest disasters become catalysts for its greatest transformations.